play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn from The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhardt of UM Hoops. It is Tuesday, April 14th, 8:30 in the morning Eastern Time. Quick turnaround from last night. Dylan, how was your evening? Just a quiet night at home, right?
Quick turnaround from a long night of waiting.
Yeah, it was. This is the, for Michigan fans, this is your postmortem from what was a thunderclap at 11:24 Eastern Time, roughly thereabout. Last night, Josh Christopher announcing he's headed to Arizona State instead of Michigan, as expected. We have a lot to get into here. We're going to give our thoughts on the whole recruitment. We're going to give our thoughts on kind of how to look at Michigan's recruiting moving forward from this, in terms of, what races do you get into, or is this going to be, or are they going to go on kind of unhindered? And of course, we're going to get into the roster, what this thing means. It looked to me, at least, like people were making decisions based on the fact that Josh Christopher was expected to be here, to be in Ann Arbor. So, there is going to be fallout roster-wise of what this means. So, a lot to get into, but first, real quick, Dylan, what do you have on the site? We are still mid-pandemic, but both outlets are going strong, I'm happy to report.
Yeah, so we did a lot on Mike Smith this weekend, incoming grad transfer from Columbia. Max wrote a really good story about him, talked to one of his coaches at Columbia, one of his AU coaches, kind of paint a picture of his game, where he's coming from, and what to expect from him next year. And then we're going to be diving in a lot more to the roster moving forward without Josh Christopher and figuring out where all of that goes. How about over at The Athletic?
Well, first of all, I should have mentioned that up top. We're going to talk about Mike Smith because we haven't potted since that.
We have not. Since
that commitment, and he is now suddenly enormously important. Over on The Athletic, I have a story on Josh Christopher. Originally, it was about Michigan. That got repurposed over the course of about 90 minutes to 2 hours last night, rewritten for the day's events. It's just on kind of the show that he brings and the brand that he's building, and what that is going to look like in college basketball in Tempe instead of Ann Arbor. So, also have a story yesterday that was kind of off the wall. If I assume people that listen to this follow recruiting on the internet and are familiar with seeing all of the photoshopped images of kids with their heads superimposed on jerseys and blah, 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 and all these graphics and stuff like that. Well, we got curious about it and ended up going and trying to hunt down kind of the guy who was for a long time at the center of that, a guy named Joe Tipton, who's a 21-year-old college student in Alabama, and I spent a couple days with him and wrote about it and what this world is like in terms of this kind of very odd subculture of college sports recruiting edits, as they're called. So if you're into that, if you're curious about that, there's a big old long story for you that was posted yesterday. I also wrote about Mike Smith. I wrote about the Michigan roster. And then going back to last week, that story from Duncan Robinson recounting how the Final Four practice in 2018 was nearly boycotted by the student athletes for student athlete welfare. So go catch all of that if you've missed it. And Dylan, let's begin the show.
Yeah, the Tipton edit story was a good read.
Thanks, dude.
Want to throw that out there.
Appreciate it, man. That was
Tipton edits no insight into the Josh Christopher recruitment, as Josh Christopher himself posted on Twitter the day before. So
that's right. He threw some shade.
Weren't getting the scoop there.
He just threw some shade. It was fascinating all around. Let's just put it that way. Dylan, were you like me as of last night, pretty much locked in on the fact that it was still going to be Michigan, or I think over the course of the day you started to say this doesn't smell right. Maybe it's Arizona State. Why would you commit this late on Eastern time? I was still expecting Michigan at the end, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, so it's tricky. You look at it, I think the stat that I saw was that it was the biggest crystal ball upset from a top 10 or 15 recruit ever. I think you have to look at it that clearly this was a situation where the optimism for Josh Christopher choosing Michigan was coming from Michigan, not necessarily from Josh Christopher or someone close to him directly. Most of the insight was from more of a local level, right? Like it was not sort of your go-to national. Like it wasn't like a lot of times you see a crystal ball come in that'll say, oh, this is going to be a done deal. And it was never really that. So you always knew there was going to be another twist in this recruitment.
But the national writers did pick him to go to Michigan. On those crystal balls.
Some did. Yeah. Not on the crystal ball. Like not like the ones that you would say, okay, it's done. Like Evan Daniels never put it in a crystal ball.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. Like, so that's the sort of deal where if it's Evan Daniels is saying it's done deal, right?
Yes. Right.
So you look at it in the sense of Christopher always talked about wanting to drum up excitement around his announcement. If he is going to just commit to the one school that everyone thinks he's going to, that's probably not the most exciting situation, right? Like how often do you see an exciting announcement?
Yeah. No, that's fair. It's fair all the way around. It appears to me as well, and I'm still working to confirm things, but from all signs are pointing to the fact that it wasn't only reporters, fans, whoever else out there thinking that it was indeed Michigan. I talked to people over there yesterday, and it was still under the impression that this was happening. So I don't know if they were given any kinds of heads up before Christopher put that video out. I'm sure this will all come out in time. It might come out by the time this podcast is up in terms of what actually was known, wasn't known internally over there. But as of yesterday midday, having a conversation with people over there, it was still fully expected this was happening. So you're right, man. Like it is very rare that everyone just gets completely blindsided by a commitment. And I did talk to our ASU writer this weekend, and he asked me. I said I think it's Michigan, and I asked him. He said I think it's Michigan too. But I think from what he was hearing from the Arizona State staff at that time was like they still thought that they were in it. So he ended up talking to LaRon Christopher, Josh's dad, last night after the commitment, and he said that Josh made the decision last week but didn't really tell anyone, and that Bobby Hurley and the ASU guys literally learned that they were getting him when that video was tweeted out. So he did live up to his word that people were going to be taken aback by his commitment.
Yeah, you don't get a surprise commitment by telegraphing what you're going to do in the week before, right? It's obviously a big swing and a miss, and it's also just this kind of thing happens in recruiting at this level, right? You see surprises, whether it was RJ Hampton basically last year kind of led Kansas on for months and months. I think they thought they were getting him, and then, oh no, he's going to go play in New Zealand, right? So when you play at the highest level of recruiting, you're going to be in for some surprises along the way, I'd say.
Yeah, that's fair. It will forever remain a fascination of mine, though, to wonder what this would have looked like if he had been here, because Michigan hasn't seen anyone like this kid in a long time in terms of what was going to be coming in around him. There was internally among him and his group, there's zero consideration to playing more than 1 year of college basketball. They're talking about creating clothing lines, and there's already, I mean, I've seen it. I've been shown pictures of, their mock-ups that they already have for a full clothing line of gear, called GUP, GUP, which is obviously, play off his nickname. There are prototypes in the work. Like, this is a whole thing, and it would have been fascinating to see that. And it was one of the reasons I thought that Michigan was the play, was that it is the biggest brand. It is the biggest platform that he had available to him, for sure. TV, everything, right? Like, they talk about how much they want exposure. Playing on the West Coast, your TV times are different, blah, blah, blah. It did check a lot of boxes. That's what I wrote yesterday, which ended up in the waste bin.
I think the counter argument to that would be, at a school like Michigan, the brand of Michigan is sometimes bigger than the player. Obviously, it can magnify it, right? But Arizona State doesn't have a brand. The brand will be Josh Christopher, right? If you go to a school like Michigan or any big national brand, right? Like, if you're going to play at, I don't know, I think that maybe would be the counter argument against that. You're just another, like, you're part of Michigan's brand.
Yeah, I mean,
your own brand.
I get what you're saying. I don't subscribe to that at all. I mean, if you're the truth and you play at one of the biggest places, you will be a monster publicity wise. Zion Williamson didn't, Duke's the biggest brand in college basketball. Zion Williamson was bigger than Duke. There are examples.
But there are a lot of players who pick to go to a school like Ben Simmons at LSU instead of like Kentucky or Duke, right? Like, it's a different path that you'll see, I think, top prospects take a fair amount, where they just want to be the guy. Anthony Edwards at Georgia, right? Like, it's your show then. And Michigan, the tough part is that Michigan had a roster that fit perfectly to have Josh Christopher slide in as a starting two and build the whole team around him. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is tough. I mean, Michigan swung and missed on a bunch of two guards in this class. And they were right in the midst of top two, top three with a lot of them. All the other pieces are there. You have your front court pieces. You have some experience returning, and they just couldn't land that 1-2 guard. And they really were pretty much all in at this point on Josh Christopher, and had been for quite some time.
Yeah. One thing I want to say is to fans, listening, you can just say, like, all right, at the end of the day, the kid picked Arizona State. He's going to go play with his brother. He's going to go be, the big fish in a little pond, and just leave it at that. I don't understand why immediately after a kid picks a different school, it has to be, all the mentions are either that he got paid for, and I don't know what the hell might have happened. Very well might have happened. But it doesn't need to immediately be the pivot to, oh, we lost because of money, or, oh, I think we dodged a bullet here. He's got too much, swagger. His brand's too big. He wouldn't have been team-oriented, blah, blah, blah. Just say that he picked another school. Am I wrong? I mean, and now I don't need to be ranting about this, but it's also like, it's hard not to when you just get bombarded with comments and tweets that you're just like, dude, what the fuck? Just relax, okay? The kid picked a different school.
I think most of the reaction was probably along the lines of maybe how it went down, right? That there were obviously some sort of impression that Michigan was in a favorable position in his recruitment, which obviously came to some extent from his camp. And I think that seemed to be the larger frustration that I saw people venting about online last night. But I tend to not try to worry too much about what people are just yelling about on the internet, because it's always going to be something to yell about. So
yeah, sometimes the toxicity always seeps through somehow, and whatever.
And if you don't want to, if it wasn't really a sort of deal where I don't think Josh Christopher wanted his announcement to go down without attention either, considering he waited until 11:24 p.m. on the day that he announced without ever announcing a time. So he certainly succeeded at drumming up.
Yeah, but also like that's outside expectation of I'm waiting all day, so this is bullshit. Like, dude, first of all, he lives in LA, and his day is not subscribed to people sitting around waiting on Twitter. So I didn't really understand that.
The quote from his dad was what? He had the whole world on lock.
Yeah.
I think his intention exactly was to, like, he knew exactly what he was doing. It wasn't.
Yeah, but just because I don't see anything wrong with that though. Having people wait for do you? Like just because just because he says it was yesterday, he needed to do it at 9 a.m. Eastern time so that we could all wrap up our work days early.
People can do what I don't think there's any problem with it, but when you say, like, who waits till 8 p.m. to make an announcement? He's trending, man. He had the whole world on locks. It's clearly the reaction that you're going for. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's fair.
You can go for whatever reaction you want.
I just thought it was really funny that it was like, this is bullshit. I'm not sitting around here waiting all day. Well, it's like, you know what? I think you are. So why don't you sit tight? I don't know. Just a lot of salt. It wouldn't have mattered if it were today, and it wouldn't have mattered if it were next week or in July. So, yeah, this is the fun of recruiting. Could you imagine being a coach going through this shit? Fuck that. So let's get into the roster stuff, or do you have anything else on how this went down or anything?
Well, I think it's interesting to think about from a big picture, recruiting wise, who you prioritize recruiting, where Michigan came into this situation when Juwan Howard was hired less than a year ago, right? 10 months ago, thereabouts. Arizona State had been recruiting his brother his brother committed almost a year ago. So, like, Bobby Hurley has been recruiting this family. Michigan was playing catch up in every 2020 recruitment.
Yes.
And I think that probably had at least some impact on who was most recruitable for Michigan to go after, especially at the very top level.
Yeah, it seemed like at the top level they jumped on the opportunities where they didn't, where like the blue bloods, right? Your top six basically hadn't already made, a year of headway, 2 years of headway that you're competing. You're not just going to jump into a recruitment with Kansas and North Carolina, right, and expect to make up ground. They really went for these kind of more outlier top 20 guys. Is that fair to say? In hindsight,
yeah, I think that's they unturned a lot of stones, right? Michigan offered a lot of guys, went after a lot of guys, but at the end of the day, they were playing catch up, and they kind of ended up in some more. They weren't able to be selective, I would say, about the recruitments they went headfirst into. Clearly, they wanted to land some 5-star recruits in this class, and well, they did. They have the best class in the Big Ten, even without Josh Christopher. Even if Isaiah Todd doesn't come, it would still be the top-ranked class in the Big Ten. So I just think it's interesting to see, like, the takeaway from this will be what recruitments you really want to go all in on, like, and how you filter through some of the noise. I think there's no easy exact science to it, but some recruitments are going to be a little more adventurous than others. Some prospects are probably going to give you a little better understanding of the actual situation at play. Some maybe play games with the recruitment. I think that the fact that you look at Christopher's recruitment, all summer he was begging to go to Kentucky. He was talking about Kentucky as his dream school to anyone that would listen. Kentucky basically prioritized other guys, got a couple guys, and then said they're not recruiting him. And that to just pull out of a recruitment like that is something that you can do when you're Kentucky and you've signed the number 4 and number 7 ranked player in a class. But it also comes with experience of John Calipari's recruited at this level for years, kind of knows some of the red flags to look for and knows what to prioritize as far as finding a fit.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And like, now Juwan is in that that position of being able to ID the guys at 15 and 16 who, you get to know the parents, you get to know people around them, you kind of get to know get a vibe for what's it going to take basically to get it done. And a lot of guys, like you said, with Cal and other places that Duke and those places never really even got into this thing with Josh, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, you can't tell me there's no reasons why, right? Because the talent's there. You know, he's clearly a top 20 kid. It's clearly an NBA prospect. But I don't know. With Juwan going forward, like it's going to be really interesting to see kind of the guys that they go after.
I think you've already seen,
because there's still kind of a fringe thing, right? It's like if you're Michigan, and I know who Juwan Howard is, and I know the brand that Michigan has. But at the end of the day, if you are not Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, essentially, right? Maybe I'm missing one or two. If you're not in that group, you're always going to be going for kind of the more fringe top 20 guys. No?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think what I would say is a great barometer of how accessible recruitment is probably how involved Duke is. Like you mentioned that, like, if Duke's involved in recruitment, it's probably a little more, I don't know what, less complicated. How about that? So like you look at in the 2021 class, like Trevor Keels is a great example of this. He's from the DMV area. He kind of is a breakout guy this year. He's probably like in the top 30, going to trend toward the top 15. He's an elite scorer. He's a kid that is going to be recruitable. He's a kid that Michigan's already entrenched into his AAU program with team takeover with Hunter Dickinson and Terrence Williams. Those are the kind of recruitments that you can get into earlier now and have better connections that you just wouldn't have been able to last year. But then you're going to have to go against Duke, right? Because Duke's also offered him, and that's going to be a tough recruitment to win. But as the process matures, I think you'll see Michigan get involved in more of those recruitments that are maybe a little more accessible. It'll be interesting to track because Michigan's going to need a big 2021 class. So I think you've seen some adjustments already. You've seen offering in-state 2021 prospects, which took a while. So it'll be interesting to see how the Juwan Howard pitch kind of matures moving forward.
No doubt. Yeah. You bring up that 2021, man, like at the same time, I mean, even if Christopher had come, he probably wouldn't have been part of that group. But yeah, I mean, there's the potential of turnover here where this is big time restocking going on for that look. I mean, say hypothetically Livers comes back, well, in one fell swoop, you're still losing Eli Brooks, Isaiah Livers, Franz Wagner, and
potentially Franz Wagner. But you're looking at 6 to 7 scholarships open, which means you're looking at 6 basically returning players. And I think you have a good foundation with Zeb Jackson, Terrence Williams, Hunter Dickinson. Those are all multi-year Big Ten players, top 100 recruits. But you're going to basically be able to recruit to an entire starting lineup in the 2021 class. You don't have to worry about positions. You just need dudes at every spot. And you're going to have to probably look at transfers. It's going to be, we talked all for months about Michigan's scholarship situation. They're not going to have a scholarship situation for a while.
No. Which, you know, I'd been thinking, well, let's kind of pivot over here to the roster and stuff. I've been thinking here for a little bit that they would be wise, if possible, to take a underclassman transfer in this class. Just to have older guys going into 21, 22. I mean, teams of freshmen and sophomores rarely win, especially in the Big Ten. Like, you do need older guys. I don't care how much talent you accumulate. You know, you need men. You need guys who have been through things and played games and are older physically, more mature, things like that. So, you know, I've felt that if they can get a guy who you're getting one more year out of, that would be ideal. And especially now, I think this waiver is going to go through where it's going to be, you're not going to need, or rule change, not waiver. I think this rule change is going to go through where You're not going to need a waiver to play immediately. I think it's just going to be basically a blanket. Everyone's eligible next year. I feel like that's the play and whether it's right now, there are going to continue to be guys who come available. They really need to pick their spot on making this next edition.
Yeah. So the latest reports on the transfer waiver are that it will be discussed, I think 10 days from now, April 24th, and then voted on May 20th.
Yes.
And it would go into effect immediately.
Yes.
Which would mean every transfer is eligible for a one-time waiver that would give them immediate eligibility with no conditions, just blanket
correct
eligibility. Do you expect that means on May 20th there will be a rush of players in the transfer portal?
Yes, I do. And I've talked to coaches about this, and they're all expecting it as well, especially the mid-major guys who are sitting there basically shitting their pants because it is going to be potentially brutal for them. If anyone, the guys who are going to take it.
Especially when you start to consider that the deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft is June 3rd. So that's a week, 2 weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that could also move, whatever. We don't know. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the transfer portal will continue to turn, and that it's sort of like a game of poker, though, because there are transfers out there now who maybe are easier to land, not knowing that they'd get immediate eligibility. But maybe there'll be better transfers still out there. So that's a tricky spot for Michigan to be in. Michigan also could have additional scholarships if Isaiah Livers stays in the draft, Isaiah Todd doesn't make it to campus. So a lot of moving pieces. Filling out with, I like how, we're not calling them sit-out transfers, but underclassmen transfers makes a ton of sense. If you could get a couple, sophomores who are immediately eligible, that really balances things out moving forward.
Yeah. My instinct says that I would wait until later. I just think there's going to be a wealth of guys coming available. And on top, Todd's an interesting deal here, because, it's been very much fluid on whether this is actually going to happen or not. And so let's say the transcript's fine, right? And because you're talking about a guy who went to 4 high schools. It is worth considering the fact, okay, is that going to be, does he have what it takes, academically, paper-wise, to be okay getting in, right? So let's say that's all good and he's in, okay? There's still been the question of whether he actually goes through with it. I do kind of think the Josh Christopher thing probably helps in that. The whole idea of being the second fiddle to that show, I don't think might have been very attractive. Do you agree with that?
I think Joshua Christopher not being on Michigan's roster makes the roster less appealing overall to overall ceiling, but in terms of individual players' opportunity, someone like Isaiah Todd or Isaiah Livers, it probably is actually more appealing to be on the roster.
Couldn't agree more.
Not that I really think that those players are best served to take over some of the whatever playmaking or responsibility or usage or anything else, but they probably will think that they would benefit from it at the very least.
Right. So if those guys are in the fold, there's still a lot to like, I feel like, about the 2021 team. But there is work to be done, and I do feel like there are going to be opportunities that come available for additions right now that can't be foreseen, and the longer you wait, the stronger it'll be. Because if you just take one of the guys available now, I mean, I've just looked at the kind of the names that are out there now. There's some guys, okay, but nothing that I'm thinking really bolsters a team that's trying to compete in the top 4 of the Big Ten. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I have not really dug too deep into the transfer portal, but a lot of the initial kind of movers have come off the board. And it depends on what you're looking for, right? So just looking at Michigan's roster, you're looking at the backcourt as where you want immediate help. And with Mike Smith in the fold, I think you probably want to look at more of a true combo guard, not really like a point guard, but a 6'4" type of scoring guard. I don't see like an easy plug and play fit to just take that spot, right? Would you say, I'm curious because transfers are so fascinating to see how they're perceived. Every team that gets a transfer thinks they're going to be amazing. Every school that loses a transfer either isn't particularly enamored with the player if it's a high major, or is just pissed to lose them, right?
Just the great unspoken thing in all of this, and it's 1,000% true. Like wherever David Julius goes, he is going to be touted as, and this is not like a knock on David Julius at all, right? But if he came back to Michigan next year, people would be like, all right, is David Julius actually going to prove anything? It would be rather vanilla, we'll say. Wherever he goes, it's going to be like the biggest deal and blah, blah, blah. So it's a perfect example of it.
So, but at the same time, do you think a mid-major all-conference player or a high-major sort of middling rotation player is a better ad?
A perfect world would be a 39% three-point shooter from a high-major conference, in my opinion, and who can dribble the ball.
Yeah, I think having a guy like that more than a mid-major who wants to kind of be the guy could actually work better for where the roster is at this point.
Yes.
Probably a better defender, probably a high major athlete as a better kind of baseline. So I think that's where you look. I think Charles Matthews really is a great example of that. Obviously, he was higher touted out of high school and whatnot, but guys that are lost at that level sometimes really do well just with a new change of scenery. Obviously, the sit-out rule, I think, kind of hurts that if you are going to be immediately eligible. But that'll be interesting to see what comes available, because at the same time, those aren't necessarily the kind of people you're talking about being the ones to jump in the transfer portal if there's one-time eligibility, right? So, bit of give and take there.
And what I think here's the thing. So, the biggest thing that's going on right now in college basketball is the back channeling that's going on amid programs recruiting off of other programs' rosters. It's like it is at the highest degree right now, especially because no one can go anywhere or do anything. It's all just guys on their phones. And it's not directly, right? Say I'm assistant coach A at school A, right? It's not me calling a kid directly and saying, hey, man, we got a roster spot here at, my school. Come on over. But it's not that. I'm sure that does happen, which is pretty messed up, but it's far more AAU guys.
AAU coach
handlers
C is talking to
and it's
assistant coach A through Z.
It's just amazing what's happening out there. So, like, if that thing, that's why I say if that rule goes into effect, I really agree with the first premise you said here, that there's just going to be a wave of bodies going out there, and it's not all going to be guys who think that they have prearranged spots to go. It's going to be way more, I have all this interest in me, I'm going to go it's going to be like testing the waters, except for testing the waters within college basketball. I really see that happening. And to have be a place like Michigan with the notoriety, right, with the brand, blah, 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 the success that it's had, to be going out there and being able to shop minutes at the two has to be attractive.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the backcourt. Right now, I would say you're probably looking at Mike Smith starting at point guard and Eli Brooks starting at the two. Do you agree?
I agree.
And what would you set a level of comfort at if you had to evaluate it for Just like what you
It's-
think of or
yeah.
what Michigan thinks of it.
Well, this is a Mike Smith conversation then, because it really boils down to, is he a guy who can play 30 minutes in the Big Ten and be legit, not only, shooting, but also running an offense, playing out of certain sets. How good of a creator is he, right? He has averaged 4 assists a game, but it's hard to average more than 4 assists a game when you're taking 19 shots a game on a team that isn't good, So how good is Mike Smith right now is the question. And I know Michigan fans are having flashbacks to the hype around Jerron Simmons, and I think that actually is tempering things a little bit on Smith, which is good, right? You don't need to just be like, oh, well, we didn't get Josh Christopher. Now I think Mike Smith is going to be an all Big Ten player. It doesn't work that way. I watched plenty of film on him. I've talked to 2 opposing coaches in the Ivy League. I'm not from the school of I think that this is going to be a, let's say upper half of the Big Ten point guard.
Yeah, watching film of him, I think best case would have been him playing as a third guard who can give you a change of pace at point guard.
For sure. Put it this way. If Christopher came, I still think Eli Brooks was starting at point guard next year.
Yes, but the Eli Brooks at point guard thing works a lot better when it's Josh Christopher at 2 guard, right?
No doubt. I'm just saying I didn't think Mike Smith was going to come in and get the starting point guard job. That's my
point. I think we both agree with that. I think it's important to point out, Smith is a point guard. He's not obviously he took a lot of shots. That Columbia team was a mess. Their second and third best players were both hurt. His teammates couldn't really shoot. He shot a lot because they didn't have anything else. And in the story Max wrote about him, his assistant coach basically said, yeah, this is what we had to do. We had no other way to score. So I do think it's feasible that he settles into more of a high assist role, especially when it becomes clear that it's really hard for him to score inside given his height. And as that becomes apparent, you're going to look to pass more. I just don't know what the ceiling is really there. I think you hope that he can give you rotation minutes and the other guys on the team are going to carry a lot of the load. So you have other pieces to go around him, right? I don't know. I think his shot translates better than Jerron Simmons. His shot looks better. He shoots the ball really well in catch and shoot spots, which is tough to get at a generous 5'11" or whatever. He's not 5'11".
Way. He's 5. I put it at 5'9".
Yeah, he's small. And
really small.
What I come back to is that to be small as a point guard and play in the Big Ten, I feel like you have to have one special skill. Whether it's like Tum Tum, it was his defense, right? And he played a lot because of his defense. PJ Thompson played a lot because he shot 40% from 3. You have to have something to hold your head on. And Mike Smith's thing is basically that he did everything in the Ivy League. And it's hard to translate doing everything at a higher level as much as it is to do one or two things, right? Duncan Robinson coming up from Division III to Division I, it was a feasible thing because he was just going to shoot, right? He didn't have to try to...
And he was 6'8".
Yeah, well, but he couldn't guard anyone.
Right.
So, there was very clear limitations. You ask him to be an all-around player at Williams,
sure,
he's going to be a specialist, and it's easier to do that.
Right.
I brought up the height. You're asking to be...
Sorry, go finish your thought.
Mike Smith, you're asking to be an all-around point guard, which is a big ask, I would say.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I brought up the height because if Duncan was 6'3", there's zero chance that he would have ever been brought in here just based on, okay, his shooting percentage is a shooting percentage. That's great. But, John brought him in because he was a 6'8" guy. And, when I look at Mike Smith, at 5'9", when you watch the tape, he's quick, but he's not it's not that electric, just burn by guys, quickness, speed all over the floor where he's just, kind of impossible to corral. And that's me watching him against Ivy competition. He's obviously quicker than the guys that he was going against, but he kind of plays in this rhythmic way more than this just burning by people left and right. I don't know how is he going to compete against high major length? And it's not just getting his shots off, right? It's executing passes. It's being able to see the floor. There's so much more that goes into it. Like if you're playing out of a ball screen and you're 5'9" in the Big Ten and you're not just a blink and miss it fast guy, it's hard. It's going to be really hard, I think, for him to execute a lot of things. And I could be completely wrong for sure, but there's a lot when it comes to him. It's a lot of I need to see it.
The way I'd put it is if you can make 10 passes out of a ball screen in the Ivy League and you can make all the reads, make all the passes. Well, now with length around you, maybe you're getting a hard hedge or a trap with a guy that's 7 foot tall. You can only make 6, and then if the 6 are taken away, all of a sudden you don't have a read, right? So being able, it just sort of takes down your diversity of offense, right? Yeah. And you have to find a new way to survive. Like a guy like Xavier Simpson, all of a sudden it's a hook shot. Mike Smith's going to have to adjust to that, and he's only going to have a year to do it. So that's a tough spot. The bigger thing, though, is so say Mike Smith is passable, good, whatever you want to say. Like
the 8th best point guard in the Big Ten.
Expectations.
Okay.
Eli Brooks, he's solid. He can give you minutes. You're still trying to find out a third guard right now. And you have Zeb Jackson coming in. I think he's kind of been overlooked in all the hype around Josh Christopher and everything else, but he's a top 100 kid who can give you minutes between both guard spots.
Sure.
But I don't know what exactly you expect from him at this point.
Well, I agree. You have to see it from Zeb, but I circle Franz Wagner here. He's going to play 36 minutes a game as long as he's not in foul trouble, and it's not all going to be at the 3. I think he's going to play a decent amount of 2. There will still be times, I think, where you see Eli at the 1, Franz at the 2. If Livers is back, right, he's at the 3, John's at the 4. Like, that's going to be a lineup that probably plays a healthy amount of minutes, given what right now, obviously, if you get an addition, things can change. But if this roster was playing tomorrow in a game, which would be amazing on a number of levels. Sorry, I just had heart palpitations at the thought of seeing basketball in person. Like if this roster was rolled out tomorrow, that would be a lineup that I think sees 10 minutes in the game.
Yeah, I think the fewer minutes you can bank on Franz Wagner playing the 2, the better your team will be.
In a perfect world, yes, that's true.
I think you're worried about defense. Eli Brooks, obviously, was a good defender last year. He's not the sort of game-changing defender that can make everything else disappear. You're bringing in a point guard who's small and not going to be a plus defender at this level. I think you need some kind of another perimeter defensive option, and I don't think Franz Wagner's great on defense, but he's great when he can play off the ball and uses his length and all of that stuff that he can do much more effectively. He's at the 3 or the 4. I think. Could he play some 2? Yes. I think you want to try to make it so maybe you can construct your rotation where that's not a 10-minute a game demand.
In a perfect world, yes, I would agree with you. But considering what's here, I think that would have to be the plan as of right now. If a guy like Zeb is ready to play, right, that can change things. If a guy like Adrian Nunez is ready to, go in and actually make shots, that's a different thing. But considering that the wealth of serviceable bodies where they are, I just think it's to get through games, to win games, it's going to have to be Franz being the most versatile piece that you have, and you just move him around, and he's kind of the, it's tough because he's the most versatile, so he's kind of your plug-in in case you need it. But at the same time, he's also your best player, and you probably want to just leave him in his most advantageous situation, right? That's hard. That's why coaches get paid.
So Zeb Jackson, Cole Bajema, both top 100 recruits.
Yep.
Both probably projected at a position of need. What are your odds that either or both are in the rotation next year?
Cole's so hard. I mean, he's the one that I circle, and when I think of what is being off-season development for this roster, the one that's really going to suffer isn't the right word, right? But like he's the one that's probably going to feel, in terms of his development, he's going to feel the missed opportunity of this offseason more so than anyone. He's someone who needed to spend 3 months with John Sanderson, right? And John Sanderson was like, I remember talking to him late in the year where he's just like, man, I just can't wait to get my hands on Cole this offseason and put in work because he is, obviously physically underdeveloped, but athletically, I mean, he is raw, and but his ceiling is extremely high in terms of what he could be as an athlete. So I have no idea. I think Cole still, I wouldn't write him off. If I had to pick between him and Zeb averaging more minutes next year, I'd probably take Cole.
Okay.
If I were betting. And that doesn't mean 20, but could certainly mean 10.
Yeah, and if you look ahead, we talked about the 20, 21, 22 team. I mean, if Bajema can be a rotation player this year, he's the only real two guard on the roster the next year, assuming Franz goes to the NBA, right? So you would like to see him come along in that regard because there's going to be a lot of opportunity for him on that next team. I just wanted to mention him because I think we talked about this on a recent pod and didn't even really mention him in the backcourt. I think it's too early to write off Zeb Jackson being a rotation player too. Top 100 players play as freshmen in the Big Ten. It's not unheard of.
It would have just been. It's hard because of at Montverde. I mean, he was playing on the best team in the country by a mile, and it was hard to see what he. What he was. He wasn't a standout at Montverde.
No, he was a sort of play the role you'd hope he'd play at Michigan, where maybe he gives you some minutes off the bench. But at the same time, if he was a standout in Division III in Ohio, would that change how you feel about him, right? Like, it's hard to say what's best for someone's development. Does that make sense? So, yeah, he wasn't a standout at Montverde, but he was playing behind a bunch of All-Americans.
Is that how you say it? Just hard silent E, hard D? Montverde?
I think so.
I say
pronunciation's why they come here.
I say Montverde. Isn't there an E on the end?
Yeah, I could be wrong.
I don't know.
Pronunciation's not our strong suit on this podcast.
Okay, continue on. I'm sorry.
I'm curious what to see with him. I have it on my list to go back and watch some of their games this offseason and kind of pick apart what he is. It's hard because he didn't play UIBL, so he played on a smaller summer circuit and played well, but had the chance to play kind of as the focal point for his team. Mm-hmm. But I think you need him to be a rotation guy on this team just because of the ball handling on the roster. And
right.
I don't know why.
I'm just interested in
provide some of that.
I mean, I get Todd and I get Zeb Jackson and Cole and talking about how they can fill out the backcourt. I'm still more surprised that you don't just see them kind of defaulting to just especially if Livers is back and you have Todd and you have Johns and you have Livers and they're going to want to give Terrence Williams at least some run. It doesn't all just add up to Franz sliding over and playing a third of the game at the 2.
So you're going to play Franz Wagner at the 2 and the combination of Hunter Dickinson and Austin Davis at the 5, and you're going to play defense. I don't know how. That's going to be a tough situation.
Okay. So you're going to sell me on Cole Bajema's defense or Zeb Jackson's defense or any of these other guy over Franz?
I think there's a chance that Zeb Jackson's a better perimeter defender than Franz Wagner one-on-one. Do you disagree? I mean,
I have literally no idea, but I think Franz is a decent defensive player. He's got good length. It wasn't great last year, but like he's gonna be better as a sophomore. He's currently working out in DC with an NBA center. So.
He's a good defensive player. I would say he's a great defensive player.
As long as he's defending the right guy.
Yeah. So the question is where do you bend?
But it's not like he's going against NBA 2s in the Big Ten. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's why I think you need a 6'4" guy, a 6'5" guy who can play defense on this roster.
Yes, and dribble.
To get the flexibility that you want out of the roster. I don't know how you just need to add one more player in that mold. Yeah. And preferably, I mean, there's a chance that bringing in a transfer could actually be a better thing defensively than landing Josh Christopher. You're not going to get any of that playmaking that you need out of the transfer market, I'd say. But defensively, you can probably find a guy who's 6'5" and can defend at a high major level more than a playmaking guard who can handle all your ball screen offense.
Agreed. I think that's fair.
But no, I'm not trying to say that any of those things are the answer, but I think that finding another rotational guard is an important piece, regardless of Franz Wagner being able to slide down.
Yeah, preferably one that has more than 1 year of eligibility.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so it could be, but that's what I was talking about, players on the roster.
Sure.
Obviously, you can add a transfer. What do you think? So if you're going to slide Franz down, are you just sticking with your true centers on the inside? Is that what you think is best for this?
Oh, that's all. That's also all matchup dependent, right? There's just some teams that they're going to basically go with a true five. I think there will be opportunities to certainly throw Brandon Johns, Isaiah Todd at the five and just see, if it works against whatever the matchup that presents itself is. You will see that. Whether that becomes a default lineup is really hard to project. I don't see it being a default lineup with Isaiah Todd at the five. Will he be there on occasion? Maybe, but I don't see that being a thing. I far more, if they go smaller, I far more think of Brandon Johns seeing time there. I know you disagree with me.
No, I don't completely disagree. I think Isaiah Todd is 6'10", but he is not an interior player.
No.
He does not want to play physical sort of basketball. He is a finesse player. I wrote about him a couple weeks ago, and he's mastered the post-up three-point shot where he will post up about 15 feet from the basket and somehow drift all the way to the three-point line to shoot a step back. So that's very much his game, and he can do things at 6'10", dribble, do all these other things, but
and he is not coming here to play the five. If he shows up here and they start playing him at the five, I'll start putting wagers out there on whether you see him for the next month still in the program.
I do think his length at the four next to an undersized five could be helpful.
For sure.
If that makes sense.
For sure.
So he might not guard the five, but he's a better athlete.
And that's an interesting lineup. Livers check in a five, Todd at the four. You have length. You have got guys who can jump, go above the rim, stuff like that. Now, if there's any power on the floor going up against Todd, I would like to see him defend a true power forward. I don't know how many of those exist anymore, but you get my point.
Oh, put Terrence Williams at the five.
Sure.
I mean, he's
like
the exact opposite.
You're going junkyard dog? I love it.
I mean, like against a team like Ohio State with Kyle Young is probably going to play the five.
Go like old school, like David West at the five. Remember those Xavier teams, man?
But I'm just saying, Terrence Williams is a physical, hard-nosed dude. Brandon Johns can be that guy. But if you have Todd next to him, then you get back some of that rebounding or maybe some shot blocking. All possibilities to discuss down the line, potentially.
It being April 14th.
And so national signing period starts tomorrow.
Yes.
And Michigan has Isaiah Todd, Hunter Dickinson, and Terrence Williams all unsigned. So that'll be our first glimpse into whatever happens there.
All eyes on Isaiah Todd. I mean, I assume obviously Dickinson signing. Terrence Williams texted me the other day and said, he's just going to sign on the 15th. I don't know if the fan base is going to be able to handle this if it's Friday and Todd is still unsigned.
And to be fair, signing doesn't really change much.
No, but it's just the principle of the matter.
It is the principle of the matter, but it would not mean that he's enrolled, or B, that he's not going to explore some other opportunity.
1,000%.
Just
that
to clarify.
signature will be as
It means he won't play
valuable
college
as the paper
basketball
it's written on, right?
for another team. That's it.
Right.
But it would mean some sort of optimism as far as,
Commitment.
I would say, his likelihood to enroll and his commitment overall.
Yes.
But it's more of a symbolic thing.
Yes. I agree.
Anything else that we need to...
There's a lot going on with this team.
There is.
God damn. No, I can't think of anything else. I mean, because the thing is, we're just going to keep having this conversation. So...
Conversation won't change.
We could probably leave it here for today, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will wrap it on that. Make sure you subscribe to Hoops. Dylan has great stuff over there. I've been enjoying his series, breaking down the freshmen who are coming in. If you want to get, I think, a really real feel for what each guy can bring next year, that's something to kind of lean into and pay a lot of attention to and give a good long look at. So check that out on Hoops. Make sure you subscribe to The Athletic and check out everything over there. Far beyond me. There's time to be spent on the Athletic app if you are looking to read and kill some time, which we all are. So check that out and enjoy a free or 90-day free trial if you subscribe right now. So with that, that'll do it for Dylan. I'm Brendan. Thanks for listening. Make sure you are getting takeout from your local restaurants and tip well when you do. See you later.